warm welcome to you, Mr. Khar. You know, the RBI's recent action against New India Cooperative Bank has sparked panic among customers. I'm sure you've been following it as well. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see the scenes right outside the bank. You know, some have deposited around 1 lakh rupees, others have their entire retirement savings. First and foremost, I need to understand from you, what does this situation really mean for the common people who are directly impacted?
Thank you. It's unfortunate that this has happened, and this keeps on happening recurringly, and which is of utmost concern for the consumers who invest their faith with their money in the banks. In this case, what we know as of now, let me just put the facts as they are. Number one, the bank's license has not been cancelled. The bank's license is in operation. What has been suspended is of utmost concern to the consumer, though. The consumer cannot withdraw money from his savings or current bank account. So that is why this panic is understandable. It will only grow as we go along, unfortunately. Second, the only relief that is available as of now is one that you can withdraw your key important positions from the locker, but it does not mitigate the challenge of the cash which is invested in the banks through FDs or through saving banks or through recurring deposits. Now the mitigation there is of a 5 lakh rupee insurance against your fixed deposits. For that again, we'll have to cross check, when does that come into action? It's not automatically that it will come into action. There's a process for that applies not just to this bank. Every bank FD attracts an upper limit of 5 lakh rupees of a protection, which is an insurance. So the message there is that it's not that if you have a 1 lakh rupee FD, then also you will get that 5 lakh rupees. That's not the case. So there is a certain provisioning of FDs to be in your individual bank account. Then or there are multiple FDs which accumulate together to beyond 5 lakhs, that you will get that 5 lakh rupee cover, which again is a process independent of this bank, where it's going to take some time. So that relief is not immediately available. That's why the panic. Locker is a good relief. So that is the ground situation. You cannot access your ATM, you cannot withdraw your cash, you cannot pick up a loan from there. That is what the current situation is in regard to the consumer. For the bank at the macro governance level, obviously there are massive lapses that have been cited by the RBI without giving any specific details. That again puts a question mark of what is the future for the bank. 6 months down the line when it's reviewed, what was the initial challenge? Why did it happen? So there is a learning there. If we look at earlier cases of such violations where RBI has flagged it, generally a cooperative bank runs into trouble or has run into trouble on this account in the recent past on account of the borrowers who are also the board members turning into large scale borrowers. So that's where the skew in regard to the borrowers who continue to run the bank, because that is the cooperative format. In a cooperative bank format, what happens is that customers choose the board of directors, and in turn that is a move which is said to be democratizing the decision making and empowering the community in terms of financialization of their core agenda. But when it gets misused, when customers turn borrowers, turn board of directors, and unfortunately, if I may add, from past precedents we have seen that they also have political connections. We have to get to the case in this particular episode while we get more details there. But generally, there's labyrinth of a customer turning a borrower, turning a board director, and then finally being flexing muscles politically is where the challenge is. Should the question being raised and will be raised repeatedly, what can RBI do, or what should have RBI done to prevent this kind of arrest? I think there is some learning there, because the moment they announce it, there's going to be panic. Can this panic be completely stopped? I don't think so, because there will be that communication to that bank on one particular day. We have no knowledge at this stage whether RBI has given enough number of notices, warnings to the bank which were not adhered to, that the RBI was forced to come to this drastic decision. But if those notices were not served, then there is a case for RBI also to reimagine its governance culture vis-a-vis cooperative banks. Let's not run down cooperatives as a genre. Cooperative banks have done human service. They mitigated the 2009 financial crisis. They have a role in community development. But governance is the key challenge, and governance gets misused when the board of directors turn the decision making inwards, and at times there is a mismatch between the loan payment, the loan pickup, and that creates the financial misgovernance. We don't have details. Let me repeat, of this particular case as of now. Generally, it is not a KYC violation that looks like to be the case. Then there wouldn't be such a stringent decision taken by RBI. It looks like a larger challenge where the decision making in terms of what lies with the bank as its deposit overall and how it has been used, how it has been navigated, and where does it rest right now in terms of the NPA quotient if that comes into the play.
Right, like Mr. Khar said, we don't have the details, and we of course are not going to speculate on it as well. We will wait till we have all the details and then continue to bring you the latest on this. But let's also quickly go across to my colleague Jay Prakash, who continues to stay with us. Jay Prakash, बैंक का कोई भी अधिकारी वहाँ पे आपको देखने को मिल रहा है? ग्राहकों से बात करने की कोशिश की जा रही है? क्या उन्हें समझाने या भरोसा दिलाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं भी वहाँ कोई या नहीं?
बिल्कुल, बैंक के जो मैनेजर हैं, डेप्यूटी मैनेजर हैं, वो बाहर आए थे। उन्होंने मराठी भाषा में लोगों को ये समझाने की कोशिश की कि लॉकर का एक्सेस लोगों को मिल चुका है, टोकन लोगों को दिया जा रहा है। लेकिन जहां तक बात सेविंग अकाउंट्स की है, एफडीज की है, करंट अकाउंट की है, उनका यही कहना था कि इसके बारे में जो बड़े अधिकारी हैं वो आकर जानकारी देंगे। आप देख सकते हैं जो आरबीआई की नोटिस है वो लोग यहाँ पर अपने मोबाइल में ले रहे हैं, कोशिश लोग कर रहे हैं। अकाउंट यहाँ पर है?
यस, करंट और सेविंग दोनों है।
करंट और सेविंग
दोनों अकाउंट है।
कितने साल से आपका अकाउंट है?
अराउंड नहीं तो 2014 से है।
2014 से जो आपका अकाउंट, करंट अकाउंट 2014 से, तो कितना आपका पैसा अंदर रुका हुआ है?
अराउंड करंट में रहेगा 1 लाख अबव है, सेविंग में 50 अबव है।
अच्छा, एफडी वगैरह भी किया आपने?
एफडी था, मैंने विड्रॉल कर लिया था पहले कुछ जरूरत के लिए।
अभी आपको क्या कहना है कुछ बैंक के अधिकारियों से? आपके
बैंक का, गवर्नमेंट का भी गलती है ना। गवर्नमेंट को भी ये इतना भीड़ लगने के पहले इन्फॉर्म करना चाहिए था। तो मेल रात को ये लोग मेल डाला, सभी जो नोटिस आई मेल रात को है हम लोग को, उसके पहले अगर पता चलता तो हम लोग किधर न किधर एडजस्ट करते थे। अभी बिजनेस अकाउंट है, उसको क्या करना है? अगर ये 90 डेज बंद करेगा तो 90 डेज हम लोग करेंगे क्या? क्या बिजनेस बंद कर देने का, बैंक बंद हो गई तो हम लोग भी घर चले जाने का? वही हाल हो गया ना। करंट अकाउंट मीन्स सेविंग बंद हुआ, कुछ प्रॉब्लम नहीं, एटलीस्ट करंट तो एक्सेस देना चाहिए।
तो यानी कि आपके बिजनेस पर इसका पूरा इफेक्ट होगा?
इफेक्ट 100% इफेक्ट होगा ना। लोगों को चेक इशू किया, उनको सबको बोल रहा है कि मत डालो। अभी क्या करना है कि नाम भी खराब हो रहा है और पैसे भी नहीं मिल रहे।
क्या चीज़ का बिजनेस है आपका?
एयर कंडीशनिंग का।
एयर कंडीशन का बिजनेस है, तो आपके चेक्स लगे हुए हैं उसके लिए?
चेक्स ऑलरेडी दिया हुआ है, कस्टमर को इशू किया हुआ है, वेंडर को।
जो आपके अकाउंट में, करंट अकाउंट में चेक डालेगा वो भी पैसा रुक जाएगा?
अभी इनके प्रोसीजर के हिसाब से तो रुकेगा ही ना। जो बैंक का प्रोसीजर उसमें रुकना ही चाहिए, रुकेगा ही।
कुछ बात हुई आपके अधिकारियों से?
कोई बात करने को तैयार नहीं है ना, वो लोग किधर बात करें, सीधा पुलिस जाने नहीं दे रहे अंदर। बट एटलीस्ट करंट अकाउंट तो एक्सेस देना चाहिए उनको।
बिल्कुल, तो आप देख सकते हैं यहाँ पे बहुत सारे कस्टमर्स हैं जो करंट अकाउंट वाले हैं, सेविंग अकाउंट वाले हैं। करंट अकाउंट यानी बिजनेस, व्यापारी वर्ग जो स्मॉल स्केल या फिर लार्ज स्केल में यहाँ पर काम करते हैं। किसी के एयर कंडीशन की दुकान है, फर्नीचर की दुकान है, वो तमाम जो लोग हैं वो यहाँ पर खड़े हैं कि उनके जो बिजनेस है, उनका जो व्यापार है वो भी इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा इफेक्ट होगा। इसलिए लोग चाहते हैं कि उनको उनके पैसों का जो है एक्सेस मिल जाए। लेकिन अभी फिलहाल लॉकर वाले जो हैं उन्हीं को एक्सेस मिला है। लॉकर वालों की लंबी कतार है, सबको टोकन दे दिया गया है।
Right, Jay Prakash, continue to stay with us. In fact, let me quickly go across to Mr. Khar, who continues to stay with us. Mr. Khar, in your experience, how do these kind of regulatory actions impact the financial security of everyday depositors? Especially in smaller cities and towns.
I mean, as I said, cooperatives are resident essentially, where the depositors are not of large scale capability. They have put in their resources, saved them, put together in these cooperative banks. The first and foremost element between a bank, whether it's a cooperative bank or it's a big bank, is element of trust. If that trust gets, so to say, sullied, there is bound to be disappointment, and in this case, there is bound to be severe disappointment because you can't access your money. It's like a case where you have to use it for a certain purpose which is planned and scheduled. So in that sense, the entire financial ecosystem goes for a toss. Like this gentleman who was speaking to our reporter in Bombay was saying that he has a current account and that is essentially used to run a day-to-day business. If that gets so to say challenged, then the business also gets challenged. Now, is there a way where, as I mentioned earlier, RBI could have looked at avoiding this kind of a rush and this kind of a decision overnight? I don't know. We'll have to see that if they have done enough number of warnings, those should have been put in the public domain rather than a bilateral relationship between the bank and the regulator. if those are in the public domain in the extent possible, the consumers would know that there is some amount of scrutiny happening, and then they would act accordingly. Because let me just put it up front, the regulator's core objective and responsibility and core KRA from a regulator's perspective here should be to ensure that the customer is not cheated. I am using that word by design, because in this case, if you can't access your money for 6 months, hopefully 6 months later down the line, he's has a reason to feel cheated. So, and it's not just the branch that there is in Mumbai. This particular bank apparently has many more branches. So, we will get to see the response and the reaction and the panic multiplying manyfold as we spend a little more time on this story.
Right, and also, sir, help us understand how important is it for people to have confidence in smaller cooperative banks? And, what really can be done to rebuild that trust after the incident that we just got to witness?
Well, I would say that, the regulatory scrutiny or the regulatory gaze, if I can use that word, should be uniform across all banks. Because even if it's a small bank, it's a scheduled bank, it's a large PSU bank, it's a private sector bank, and we have seen RBI, taking action whenever it felt that, there has been some, violation, even with large banks on credit card deployment, on debit card deployment, on NPAs. So, in that sense, there has to be complete uniformity. Even if it's a small cooperative bank, it has to be completely above board. And in terms of classifications, I would like to address that we have now, these cooperative banks, which are essentially defined by customers and community creating that architecture. There are success stories, but now, such stories also come to the fore every 6 months or every 1 year, causing all of us huge dismay. And second is there are small banks. Apparently, this particular bank also had applied for a license for a small bank. Small bank is another category which was, so to say, liberalized by RBI in recent years to have a window for banks which don't entail large deposits, large banking activity, but also have a provision for, but whatever be the definition, whatever be the nomenclature, what is absolutely crystal clear is that you need the bank in whatever shape to be completely above board. And if that is not the case, even if one customer is feeling cheated, and then that is a matter of concern for all of us as a society, and especially when it reflects back on the community that is the foundation of a cooperative bank. Imagine the amount and the quota of mistrust and distrust.
Finally, Mr. Khar, before I let you go, I have one final question. With the RBI's intervention, what does this really mean for depositors who might have their savings, tied up in smaller banks? Is there a risk to their long-term financial security?
Well, the risk is manifest, as I said. So, I repeat, if there is a challenge that's being seen by RBI, that challenge should be made public. So that, so that depositors do know that, their money is not all that safe. I mean, to imagine all banks to be on their own completely above board would be a problem. When it comes to, the question of greed and misuse the system for personal gains. So, in that sense, I would imagine that RBI and the Finance Ministry and the Cooperatives Ministry as well, all of them have to work in tandem to assuage the feelings. In this particular case, hopefully in 6 months' time, the board is able to come under the RBI's clearance zone, and its life is back to business. In the meanwhile, as a network of responsibility, we would say that don't take any panic reaction. I know there is an element of complete mistrust and agony, but it's time to stay calm.